Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. Now, today is the 4th of July, so happy 4th depending on where you're located. I hope you all have a lot of fun out there, and of course, be safe. We do have plenty of games to talk about today, though, including a game that's coming over to Xbox sometime here soon, and this game looks truly insane. It was making waves on social media over the weekend and definitely caught my attention for just how good this game looks. And I think you Xbox fans out there should definitely be excited for this one. So we'll go over that one a little later on the video. And also, is Nintendo preparing to launch a new Nintendo Switch successor sometime here soon? Thanks to a new discovery, it does seem like Nintendo is up to something. But whether or not that actually means new hardware, well, that's something that we're going to dive into today. Before we get into all that, though, we do have some other things to go over first, starting off with a new Nintendo Switch subscription. Yeah, Nintendo just announced a new subscription that's, as of this moment, exclusive to Japan only, which is a bit of a shame because it does seem like a pretty decent deal. That would be for Wide Care, which is a repair service that will fix various problems for your Nintendo Switch consoles and Joy-Cons. And yes, I did say consoles as in plural because they will fix up to 6 problems in a single year. This would include natural failures, as you might expect with a service like this, but it also covers user-based errors such as fall damage and water damage. So that's where the service really shows its worth because let's just hypothetically say you dropped your console and then it breaks or damages your screen. You know, this is a handheld console and a lot of kids do have the Switch, so this is probably not all that uncommon of an issue. Well, if you have Wide Care, instead of having to buy a whole new console or screen for a lot of money, if you're subscribed, then you can just send that right over to Nintendo and they'll take care of it for a very affordable price of 200 yen a month or 2,000 yen a year. That roughly translates to about $1.50 a month or $15 a year, so that's actually a really good price, and again, it does cover other problems such as Joy-Con issues as well, which that's probably the most problematic natural issue for Switch consoles in the first place. Newer Joy-Cons, they do seem to be much better now, but even then, they'll still take care of any pesky Joy-Con drift problems that you might end up having. So for those out there that want that extra bit of insurance on their purchases, this is actually a pretty good deal here, though unfortunately, as of this moment, like I said before, it's only in Japan as of this moment. Hopefully, that'll change sometime in the future, but I guess we'll see. Now also, PlayStation filed a very interesting patent that seemingly suggests that PlayStation 3 and other retro peripherals might work on the PlayStation 5 sometime in the future. This includes a number of devices such as the PlayStation 3 DualShock controller, a PlayStation Portable, interestingly enough, the Move controllers, and even the PlayStation iToy. You can actually take a look at the diagram yourself where you can see several of these devices appear, and you can clearly see the console in question here is the PlayStation 3 since it does label the infamous cell processor that is still wreaking havoc all these years later. That thing just continues to give Sony problems, but that's kind of the thing about this patent though. The timing of all of this kind of lines up with one of Sony's most recent missions. They are now indeed bringing back PlayStation Classics for modern platforms, and well, it is one of their main selling points for PlayStation Plus Premium. So with any type of subscription service, it's in the company's best interest to improve that service over time. And really, what's the most requested feature from fans? Well, that would be none other than local PlayStation 3 emulation. Right now, as of this moment, PlayStation 3 games can only be streamed on modern platforms, but could Sony possibly be looking into emulation for those games locally? Well, interestingly enough, in this patent, it does outline methods to emulate software that made use of retro PlayStation peripherals. So I think with that in mind, that's kind of where this patent could potentially be really exciting. In fact, Jeff Grubb some time ago stated that he had heard that Sony is looking into PlayStation 3 emulation. So I'd say at the very least, it does seem like Sony is focusing on something PlayStation 3 related for modern PlayStation consoles. And while this patent might not necessarily be completely clear, it could also be a link to that much requested PlayStation 3 emulation. Now, whether or not that's what this is actually referring to, or if anything amounts from this patent, that kind of remains to be seen, but hopefully Sony does end up figuring something out here because There's a lot of great games on the PlayStation 3 that I'd love to see come back. I know a lot of other fans out there would love to see these games come back as well. Maybe something like Metal Gear Solid 4. Let's go and talk about Nintendo though, because I guess it's that time of year again when rumors of a new Nintendo Switch starts to ramp up. This seemingly happens every year now, and well, 2022 is no different, but we're going to kind of dive into this to see if this could actually mean something. So what's happening here is that it's been spotted that Nintendo appears to be stockpiling raw materials, which could actually be a sign of new hardware incoming. We'll get more into that here in just a moment, but you can actually take a look at this graph here that shows how much money Nintendo has spent for raw materials each fiscal year. Now, as you can see in 2018, 2020, and then in 2021, they're pretty identical in terms of how much money they've spent. It's right between 9,000 and 12,000 millions of yen spent. However, what's really interesting here is that in 2019 and then in 2022, they really stand out because in both of those years, they spent significantly more. 2019 about triples the expenditure from the previous year, and there could be a major reason for this, as they did indeed release 2 new consoles that year, being the Switch Lite and then the Mariko Switch revision. So that could possibly explain what happened there. But what about in the fiscal year of 2022? Once again, we're seeing a significant increase in spending. In fact, even more so this time around, as it more than doubles what they spent in the fiscal year of 2019. So what exactly is happening here, and why such a major increase? Now, it is important to keep in mind that inflation, rising cost of parts, and just the chip shortage in general, that could naturally have an impact here. But still, a 600% increase year over year, it does seem like something else might be happening here, and as we saw back in 2019, that did correlate with a new console. So is it possible that we're seeing something similar here, where Nintendo is preparing for new hardware? Well, Nintendo was actually asked about this in an investors meeting, and let's check out their response. It is necessary to prepare for production by securing the inventory of raw materials and parts as soon as possible. The first reason is that we keep more raw material inventories than before. The second reason is the change in accounting due to the application of the new revenue recognition standard and its impact. And okay, that seems like a rather typical response that you might expect from Nintendo. Obviously, even if they do have new hardware in development, they're not going to tell us at a place like this until they're officially ready to announce it themselves. However, I do think that this response does make some sense with them trying to secure more inventory in general, just because the chip shortage, it is a very real problem. This is something that we've seen all generation long, and we really don't know when it's going to end. So Nintendo might want to get ahead of things by securing more material, as they're stating here, especially leading up to the holiday months. They might even be able to secure materials for the next year even. So that is plausible, and I think that there might be some truth to this statement. But is it the entire truth? There's the big question, because obviously when fans, they look at this, it does seem a little fishy. There is a possibility that maybe Nintendo was working on that quote-unquote Nintendo Switch Pro, or maybe even a Switch Successor. Obviously, Nintendo, they will release a successor eventually, and the Switch, it's going on its 6th year now, so I'm sure Nintendo, they're looking into their next device, and I would say that there is a very good chance that we will get their next generation platform within the next 2 years. Now, I'm not predicting that this will release anytime this year, but we might start at least hearing more about this device next year in 2023. By that point, the Switch momentum, it'll probably still be very strong, but I think as long as their next generation platform remains a hybrid console with backwards compatibility, that is very important, then I think that it will be a smooth transition into the next generation. They could then have the Nintendo Switch 2 with things like NVIDIA DLSS 2.0. That would really take their games to the next level, and then they could also continue to sell the Switch OLED and Switch Lite as cheaper models. I know Nintendo did say that the Switch was only in the middle of its life cycle, but it is important to keep in mind, just because a successor is out, that doesn't necessarily mean that they just have to stop selling the original Switch. I mean, all you really have to do is look at the PlayStation 4 that is still selling today despite the PlayStation 5 being on the market. I think the Switch could do a very similar thing, and I think that the Switch, regardless of a new device, could still be very popular, especially with the pricing. With all that said though, I'm still going to remain confirmed with my original prediction of a 2024 release for the Switch successor. But I do have to admit, this new finding of an increased expenditure in raw materials is certainly very interesting, and it definitely, it does have me reconsidering my predictions. Let me know what you all think about all this, though. When do you think a Switch successor will release? Do you think it'll be in 2023, 2024, or beyond? Let me know in the comments below. Now, we also have a new upcoming Xbox game to talk about that really caught my attention over the weekend, being Hypercharge Unboxed. This game was making some waves over the weekend on social media, and after you see the gameplay, you kind of realize why. This game looks insanely good, and after I saw it, I just kind of thought to myself, how are more people not talking about this game? It certainly seems like it's flying under the radar right now, but let's change that today and put it on the map. So, Hypercharge Unboxed was quietly announced for Xbox earlier this year. Now, unfortunately, as of this moment, we don't have an exact release date just yet, but as we learn more, of course, I'll update you as soon as I can. Either way, though, this is actually a game that released on Steam and the Nintendo Switch back in 2022 from a small team, and after looking at Steam's user reviews, 91% of everybody recommends this game. So a little bit of a hidden gem here, and based on the gameplay, I think it's going to be a perfect fit for Xbox. It's a first-person shooter, which is popular on Xbox, and you play as this action figure in several stunning environments that I think will really pop on the Xbox series. And even the jump animation itself was inspired by none other than Halo. So that there should go over well with the Xbox community. You should feel right at home with that Halo-like jump. There's also a lot of ways that you can play this game, including a single-player campaign mode that you can play cooperatively with your friends. And because you're playing as these action figure-like toys, it just looks crazy with its various over-the-top environments and all the different enemies that you can face off against. It's also a cooperative game with a horde-based mode that supports up to 4 players, including a local split screen, at least on Steam that is, so I do imagine that there's a good chance that the Xbox Series version will be capable of local split screen as well. If you do prefer competitive multiplayer, though, it also does have PvP of up to 8 players. Now again, with the verticality of this game, the Halo jump animation, the arena-based competitive mode, it just looks so insanely fun. I love the creativity that we're seeing in this game, fighting as an action figure in these toy-like environments, which again, are absolutely stunning. It almost kind of reminds me of Grounded a little bit, but with toys instead, you know? Again, though, it seems like this game so far is being a little overlooked. But with it coming to a new platform sometime here soon, being Xbox, now seems to be the perfect time to pay attention to Hypercharge Unboxed. Let's go and take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, now that June is over, how would you rate the entirety of the Summer Game Fest for 2022? And as you can see here, 5% of you gave it an A, 29% of you gave it a B, 50% gave it a C, 9% gave it a D, and then 7% of you gave it an F. So it seems like most of you all gave it that middle of the pack grade with a C, but 34% of you did give it an A or B, so it seems like a lot of you all were still very satisfied with what they showed this year. Now I will say for myself, I was pretty satisfied as well. I thought really PlayStation, Nintendo, and Xbox all had some pretty good showcases, and just kind of looking back on things, I thought that there were a lot of good games shown in June. Street Fighter 6, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Callisto Protocol, that one's looking really good, and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, they all made an appearance here. Dragon's Dogma 2, that finally got revealed. Atlas, they decided to do some smart things here and announced Persona coming over to Xbox and the Nintendo Switch. And that's really just scratching the surface of games that I found interesting that was shown in the month of June. Games like High on Life, that really stood out to me. The next Forza game, I think that one looks really good. Starfield, we finally saw some gameplay on that. Nier Automata, that's coming over to the Switch. Final Fantasy 16, that got another gameplay reveal. And yeah, I just thought it was a fun overall month. Now, Nintendo, Xbox, and PlayStation, they didn't necessarily dive into their big unannounced exclusives for the most part, but I'd still say that at the very least, the next 12 months for gamers, I think, is going to be a lot of fun. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.